Hey guys, thanks for watching the Generic Tech Support YouTube channel. This video is part of the life experiences of generic tech support in actual system infrastructure. These stories are based on real events. The company's names associated with these events have been withdrawn to protect their identity. If you have any questions or comments, leave them down below. Hey everyone, this is going to be part 2 of the video where we shot it to show the exploit where we were able to use Microsoft Word to open up file share data without a log file. In this video, I'm going to show you how to correctly configure auditing logs, how to correctly configure grouping, and how to add those groups to your security groups on your actual file share structure so you can correctly access files. In a managed services scenario, doing things the right way usually takes 3 to 4 times longer. So if you're a client that got a file server set up for $150, assuming they charge $150 an hour, they didn't do this. And to those people, I would tell you to go over and reach out to my buddies over at Columbus Tech Audit. Let's jump into this. For this video, I'm going to assume that you've already configured your OU structure in Active Directory. If you haven't, check out one of my other videos on how to do that correctly. We need to create a new group policy object. In order to do that, we'll expand group policy objects, right-click, choose New. Give your auditing policy a catchy name, and click on OK. Once you created it, you'll right-click and choose GPO status and choose User Configuration Settings Disabled. That's because the auditing policies are configured for systems, not individual users. Select your auditing policy, right-click and do Edit. Next, set your configuration as seen on screen. You'll note that the default size for your application security and system logs are generally 16 meg. Since hard drives have gotten so big, make it quite a bit larger. I would suggest 128 megs for system and application, and then for security, at least 256 megs. Make sure you configure your retention to overwrite as needed. And as an extra security measure, make sure you enable preventing local guests from accessing your event logs. The location of these event logs are located under Computer Configuration, Policies, Windows Settings, Security Settings, Event Log. Once completed, scroll down. Under Event Log, you'll see Advanced Audit Policy Configuration. Double-click on that and select Audit Policies. If you haven't already, expand it by clicking the little caret. Select the option for Object Access. Select Audit File Share. Click the checkbox to configure the following audit events. Success. Click Apply. Click OK. Select Audit File System. Click the Configure the following audit events. Success. Hit OK. On the left-hand side, click Global Object Access Auditing. On the right, you'll see 2 options. Open up File System. Choose Define this policy setting and click Configure. This is the dialog box that will allow you to configure what users' groups have access to what objects, and then audit those objects based on user access groups. Without this configured, the original configuration that was defined under Object Access will not show any advanced audit inside the event log. Select the principal. The principal should be the security group you're going to add to the actual share. In our case, we're going to add a security group of Office Share. Office Share will have access to the company shared directory. We're going to audit on success, and since we're not going to configure anything for full control, we're going to uncheck full control. Now this will create an enormous log, so we want to add a condition. Now the condition can be anything, but what I would suggest you do is use user group and then change this to either not a member of any or not a member of each, or you can make it a member of any or a member of each. The value is going to equate to whatever the actual share name is. So for instance, if you wanted to create multiple share configuration values inside of your share, so in other words, you wanted somebody that had read access only, but then you also wanted somebody that had read-write access, you would use 2 different security groups. So you would create Office Share Read and then Office Share Read Write, at which point you would audit differently. So you would audit the write for the people that only had read. Therefore, if they didn't have any ability to write anything and they attempted to, you would be able to see it as an audited report. This helps you to protect your infrastructure in the event of a ransomware attack, because you'll be able to see specifically what account is attempting to write the data. This is also extremely complicated and complex, and the vast majority of managed service providers will not even get anywhere near this configuration level. But if you do this configuration level, you're about 80% more likely to not get ransomwared on your actual file server. Because presumably you would have an audit trail, a log, and an alert indicating that something was attempting to access your infrastructure. And since the average cost of ransomware recovery at this point is close to $1 million, Spending an extra couple thousand to do this configuration correctly just makes sense financially. For the sake of this though, I'm not going to create a condition since the particular group will have read-write access to the share, and I'm not going to create a read-only group. There's no reason to audit against a write on a read-only group. However, if we wanted to create a conditional access just for the sake of troubleshooting purposes, we could create a user in a group that's not a member of any of the following groups. So in other words, if this user is not a member of these groups and he attempts to write any data, read any data from this particular share, we'll automatically get an alert reporting that a user has attempted access on the actual share location. Now, obviously, if this isn't configured correctly, this probably won't exist. But if it did, it would likely provide us with the actual log information for the Word document attempting to run the exploit against the actual file share. Once you're done, you'll just click on OK, and then you'll click on Apply, and then you'll click on OK. At this point, we could jump back in here and actually take a look specifically at what this does. So we could see that the principal, which is Office Share, which is a security group that will have access to the company's share folder. And what we're doing is we're auditing on successful when a non-member of this actual group attempts to open or access any files on that actual share location. So that means if somebody outside of this group accesses that file location share and attempts to read, write, or open any of the data, we will get an audit alert and report indicating that somebody attempted to access that location. And once that's completed, we could just close out a group policy editor. So now if we look, we have our file share auditing configuration. It is a computer configuration. Our user configuration is disabled, and there are no defined settings under user configuration. It's critical if you want to maintain speed and stability of the Windows operating system that you do not mix and match user and computer configurations in a traditional configuration unless we're talking about an RDS server. If we want to apply this, what we have to do now is we have to open up our company-wide servers group and open up our file servers. Right-click and choose Link an Existing GPO. And we're going to go and find our file share auditing and click on OK. And at this point, our file share audit will take place against the file server and provide us with logging when this event is met. Now, for obvious reasons, you want to make sure all of your security groups are created before you start to play with group policy configurations to set up your auditing reports. You could also modify the size of your log files depending on how large your hard drive of your machine is. And then you could do additional configuration through group policy to change the location of the storage of where those files are saved. Let's jump over onto the file server now and configure a file share correctly. Should note, at no point am I going to open up Server Manager to do this configuration. This is also going to be a situation of do as I say, not as I do. As you should never create a share off the root of your C drive, and you should have a secondary drive available that's not part of the same disks. The reason why is because in the event of a hardware failure situation, you could grab those other drives and associate them to a new configuration on a new server, or migrate them to an existing server if this is a virtual platform, giving you access to those file shares to recreate and fix them quickly to get the infrastructure back up and running while you repair the other system. If you put everything on the root of the C drive, and that's where the OS runs, you'll need that drive to be live, at least available enough to run a robocopy script to copy the data, at which point you'll have to reconfigure all your permissions, all of your actual auditing configuration, and everything else involved in order to fix the issue. Where if you do it this way, where you put the actual files on a secondary drive, whether it's the D drive or the E drive, and have that on its separate storage location, whether it's a full VHDX file, VHD file, and not associated to the drive that's actually the root of the C drive, you'll spend far less time recovering the data in the event of an issue. However, for the sake of this right now, all I have is the C drive, and that's all I have available in order for me to create the concept here of the file share. You'll want to start one directory down. On this particular configuration, I created file shares off the root of the C drive. I then created company share, company space share, as a folder under file shares. At this point, I'm going to right-click on company share and choose properties, and then click on sharing. Click on advanced sharing. Choose the option to share this folder. Change the share name to a solid name with no spaces. For mine, I'm going to choose company. Select permissions. Remove the everyone group. Choose add. Enter in the name of the security group you created earlier. Click on OK. At this point, you have to set your security configuration for your share control. At this point, you have a choice. Will this folder exist as a standalone share, or will this be the root of a nested share configuration? While nested shares are not recommended in Microsoft Windows, it is possible to use a nested share configuration, but it would be defined at this point as to whether or not it is set up for nested share or not. In a nested share configuration, you would leave this simply as read. However, if this is just going to be a standalone share, you want to use read and change. You'll note in the previous video that when we shot it, we found that everyone group was in full control. When you have everyone group as full control, the root of the company shared directory becomes the directory that you have full access to, giving everybody, including people out in the parking lot, full access to change the permissions of the internal shares in that directory itself. But for the sake of this, because it is going to be a standalone share and not going to be a nested configuration, we're going to set up change and read. Now keep in mind that if you have a folder such as company share that you name company, so you whack server whack the share name, and then in that share directory you have 150 folders and you don't want anybody adding files to that root directory, you could set the permissions on here to read and not change, and they would still be able to have full control of the subfolders, but they wouldn't have full control of the root directory. Once you have this set, click on OK. Click on OK. Now click on security. If we go back to our domain controller real quick and we go into Active Directory users and computers, we can see that we created two different groups back in our previous video. One for backup operators, which is VSS access, and one for the IT department, which is file admin. Now in the file admin, generally speaking, you would want to use a delegated access control or a role-based access control and not the built-in administrators group for the domain admin. The reason why is because best practice with NIST configuration or STIG value configuration requires you to disable this built-in domain admin account. And obviously doing that is going to cause issues on your internal infrastructure if you don't have role-based access controls or delegated access controls set up. So for the sake of this video, I just added my domain admin into the file access group. Now realize that's kind of counterproductive since the domain admin is obviously part of the domain admins group. When you create a role-based access control, you want to literally delegate the user for that particular role. So in other words, if you have a file admin, you want to use a file admin account that only has administrative access to files, but doesn't have administrative access to servers or desktops. Which is why the OU structure is extremely important when you go through a configuration, especially if you want any level of security whatsoever. Now back on the file server, that means that we could jump into the system, into the security, specifically under advanced, and start to really dig through this to secure the file share. To start with, if we click on share, we can already see the allow configuration with only change access delegated directly to the Office share security group. If we click on auditing, what we don't see is the audit configuration we put together in group policy. The reason being is that we're not just strictly auditing this particular share. We're auditing the share from the group policy level, meaning that we don't have to go through this configuration for every single one of these, assuming that we have our configuration set up correctly through the SACLs. Doing it through group policy will save a bunch of time. However, you could still configure the audit configuration here if you wanted to. Now the effective access policy, which we touched a little bit in the previous video, all that does is gives you the ability to see what the effective access is for a particular user once you have the security group configuration completed. This is extremely helpful if you have nested permissions set. Again, I wouldn't suggest nested permissions because the problem with nested permissions is that if somebody makes a change at the root, it will write over the configuration of all the subfolders and break what you have set up. So unless you're going to script it and then update the script for the configuration changes every time you have to add or remove a user or a group, it's not worth doing. So let's go back to permissions here. Let's disable inheritance. Let's convert inherited permissions into explicit permissions on this object. Let's remove users. Let's remove administrators. And let's click on add. Let's start with our file admin. And we'll give him full control since he's in essence a domain administrator. We'll click on OK, then we'll click on Add again. At this point, we're going to enter VSS for our VSS backup group. Then we're going to click on OK. The VSS admin group only needs read access, so we can uncheck this and leave only read and click on OK, and then click on Add again. At this point, we want to add our actual company share. So we know that that's specifically called Office Share, and we'll click on OK. At this point, we're going to give modify access, but not full control, and we'll click on OK. Before you click on Apply, you want to review what you have as far as your configuration. Make sure you're part of the file admin group if you're on the account that's creating the configuration. You could always remove yourself from that particular security group at a later time after you have the initial configuration set. If this is a new configuration with no subfolders or files, you don't need to check this box. However, if this is a new share to replace a previous share and fix the permissions on said share, click the Replace All Child Object Permission entries with the inheritable permission entries from this object. Do not click this box if you're using nested permissions. Once you're done, click OK. And click Yes. Now click Close. If you open a command prompt and you type in net space share, you're going to get the information, specifically what the name of the share is, and the physical path to where that share exists on your system. The reason you want to avoid using spaces in your share is because when you have to use a script, it could cause a lot of issues. Now let's configure another share doing the same method. And at this point, we'll jump over back into our Windows 11 system and use Microsoft Word to show that the exploit is not possible any longer. So I just created another share. This one I called accounting. We could see, if we follow the full path, we could see accounting share. However, the name or the share name itself is accounting. Let's kick this off like we did the last time. We're on our Windows 11 system, and as you can see, I have access to the H drive, which is the company share. If we take a look at our command line, we can still see file server 22 / company is the name of the share. By using the UNC path, we can access the file server 22, and we can see both the accounting and the company share. In the previous video, we right-clicked on counting and chose copy. Then we went into company. We right-clicked and we did more options, and we did paste shortcut. If we follow what we did on the last video, we'll go back to this computer, we'll open up company share, and at this point we should be able to use Microsoft Word to access this accounting shortcut. Based on our previous video, all we had to do is click on Insert and then choose Link, at which point then we could hit the drop down, we could go to the company share and we could choose Accounting and hit OK, at which point we could hold the left control and click. And as you can see, we cannot open the specified file. If we try to access this directly through the actual shortcut, we're going to get the same error. At this point, this proves the reason why you would want to spend the extra money as a business owner to have your infrastructure secured by somebody competent and capable of doing so. However, I'll add a little bonus to this. If we choose our accounting share and right-click and choose Properties, and then choose Sharing, and then choose Advanced Sharing, and uncheck Share this folder and hit Apply, we're going to get a notification that there's 2 connections currently and that we should disconnect or they will be disconnected. We're just going to say yes to continue. We are then going to share this folder again, and we're going to get rid of share and use accounting again. But we're going to add a $sign to the end. We're then going to click on Permissions, remove the Everyone group, and add accounting. Select OK. Select Change and Read, hit Apply, hit OK, and hit Close. If we run another command showing our net share, we'll see accounting $sign. Now, if we go from the client machine to whack file server 22, all we'll see is company, because accounting is now a hidden directory. You would need to know specifically what the share name is with the $sign in order to access it. So if we open up our command prompt and we run net space use, we could still see H drive, which is the file server 22 company, because we do have a connection to it, and also it's not hidden. But that $sign at the end of the actual share name will hide the share. So if this particular technically advanced user knows how to do the net use command and can find this file server, it doesn't mean he'll necessarily know what to do in order to access this hidden directory. And that would be something that we would call security by obscurity. So while that doesn't protect you against ransomware, it does protect you against end users who are trying to be cheeky to get into the infrastructure with shares they don't really have access to. So hopefully you guys learned something in this video, and hopefully you enjoyed this small series. I'm going to do more of these from past experiences working in IT. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them down below. I'll get to you as soon as I can. I appreciate everybody, and thanks so much for watching. Thank you for watching the Generic Tech Support YouTube channel. Find the content of this video at https://generictechsupport.com/ #channel.